Many OECD countries are interested in the kind of skills and education that foster innovation, because innovation is considered to be one of the biggest engines of growth nowadays. And when you start talking about what are the kinds of education that need to be developed, you have basically three big role models for that. One is an entrepreneur, and so we're interested in entrepreneurship programs. Other ones are scientists and engineers, and so we are therefore interested very much in STEM education, which is one of the pillars of education for innovation. But you have also many observers who would tell you that arts education and artists are also an important role model, and that they should be more integrated in our thinking of innovation. And this is why the OECD has started this work on arts education. The idea was to understand what are the types of curricula, pedagogies, and also assessments that can actually nurture innovation in society. And we saw that indeed arts education was a good contender for that, and that we needed to look the kind of evidence showing that the different types of skills for innovation are developed in arts education. So we built on a meta-analysis that was carried out in 2000 by Ellen Wiener and Louis Hetland, which was called the Reviewing Education and the Arts Project. And we have extended it to all the new studies that have been published since 2000. And we have also covered new outcomes, which were not covered before. And so we have currently a very comprehensive overview of the empirical research on arts education in all the different areas. We cover over 500 findings on 39 different outcomes in 13 different languages. So it's a very big endeavor. One other thing that we try to do at the OECD as well is to promote evidence-based policy and better quality in educational research. And so this is also one way to show sometimes, what are the limitations of the existing research in this specific area. The book does not include the literature in general on artistic skills. First, because there is relatively little research on that. And second is because we, one of the important aspects, in this debate is the importance of foundational skills. And so we wanted to know, as some people claim, whether it is true that arts education has an impact on them. But we also wanted to very much broaden the scope of the skill that we look at. And so we've included creativity, critical thinking, as well as what we call social and behavioral skills, like the motivation, the communication, the ability to work with others, and see to what extent we have some results on these different areas. The main result is that we have a very nuanced picture, and that many of the claims or the assumptions that we have not been demonstrated yet by solid research. Even so, we have a lot of tentative results on different areas. So in fact, one result is that much fewer outcomes than we believe have been researched so far. The second one is that for some of in some areas we do have strong results, but they are very few. So in the case, for example, of theater education, we have strong causal evidence that it enhances verbal skills, so the skills that allow people to read and understand text, etc. In the case of music education, which is the most research area, we also have a few strong results, like the fact that it has a causal impact on IQ, for example, or that it improves the word decoding and the ability to hear speech in a noisy environment, and some tentative evidence as well. But in fact, in some cases, like creativity or social skills and the motivation, which are often seen as one of the important outcomes of arts education, we do have evidence, but we don't have enough evidence yet to make any strong conclusions about that. So we have tentative evidence, and what we try to do is also to show that it's not because you have sometimes promising evidence that you can make very strong statements, and so we have to be careful. An important point is that the lack of evidence does not necessarily imply the lack of impact. So that it's well possible that arts education has a strong impact on creativity, and many studies show that this is the case. But because they were so small, because there are so few of them, at this stage we're not in a position to make a big statement and say that this is one of the causal impact of arts education. We need to have several studies, some level of replication to make sure that we are certain about the effect. And of course, another thing depends very much on the design of the study. So not all studies allow us to make the same conclusions. There are some which, because of their design, lead us to have a more nuanced interpretation of the findings. Some other ones which are much more stronger than the others. And this is the kind of study that we want to promote and to see. An important point is that what we have looked at in the report is the unique contribution of arts education. So what we wanted to know is it the arts and only the arts that create that effect, or is it something else which can be actually done through the arts? And I think it's too different to answer the question for practitioners. These are two different things. So for example, in the case, it's really the arts and not something else that improves the quality of our audition, for example, music education. So there is a strong impact on that. But there are many things that are done within the arts which can be done in different ways and that we may want to continue to do in the arts because they have this positive impact, even so it's not fully unique to the arts. And there are some habits of mind, some ways of teaching, and so Ellen Wiener and Louis Hatton and some colleagues, Ellen is one of the main author of the book, in fact, has made some very interesting studies showing how teachers in visual arts explicitly try to foster some habits of mind. So it's not proven that any kind of visual arts education will lead to that result, but there is a lot to learn from these, efforts, and because they're very much at the core of the pedagogies of some art forms. One of the things that we see, or that we can infer from some of the results, is that many of, and it's true in general in the so-called transfer effect literature, many of the impact that we see occur only if you want explicitly to teach them. So for example, there is also a vast body of pedagogy study in mathematics showing that metacognitive practices are very important. And one of the things that it shows is that thinking about what you do is very important, and in fact, generally speaking, the good achievers do it. But if you explicitly teach it, then you have an impact. And so it is true. It's very, one of the things that we say in the book is that it is very likely that arts education can foster creativity, but only if people try to foster the habits of mind that are associated with creativity. It will not necessarily just come by the virtue of teaching arts education, and we all know by experience that there is not always a lot of creativity going on in arts classes. The first thing that we would be interested in stronger research with stronger theoretical basis, because in many cases we find that the questions which are asked by the research are not very well established and not very well researched. So, second thing, we would like to see much better research design so that in fact we can draw much stronger conclusions from the research. Research which is better connected with existing research and what is going on in other places. And I would say, even so, I would certainly want to see more research on the kinds of outcomes that we have researched, for example, to what extent arts education allows people to become more creative, or how it enhances their social skills. We also need more research on the impact of arts education on artistic skills themselves, and the level of, the learning outcomes in the arts, which is a primary goal, in fact, of arts education.